time to start thinking about those bedding plants. And there are going to be a lot out there, a lot of beautiful ones. And so start thinking about what you want to plant and where you're going to purchase it, and start shopping around and taking a look at what they have to offer. When you're choosing bedding plants, I'm just going to cover some of the things that you need to look for. One is good foliage color. You don't want plants that are faded out or browning or yellowing. You want a nice dark green. It can be a little bit lighter green, but for the most part, a good, healthy looking green for sure. And two examples are below on the pictures. On the left, we have verbena, and on the right, we have marigolds. And the foliage looks great. The blooms look great. These are examples of something I would buy. Okay, so key pointers, pick plants that are well filled out for the pot. And so if you're looking at 4-inch pots and you just have one little bitty stem in it, you might consider putting it back. Look for something that's more fuller, and if you're looking for 6-packs or 4-packs, make sure all those cells are filled. Make sure you're getting a good quantity for the amount that you're paying. Those plants should be full and healthy. Avoid signs of insect damage or even disease spots. Look for dead stems. If you see any of that, put them back. You want to pick something that is good and healthy. Choose varieties that are mostly problem-free. Several years ago, we had problems with impatiens, and it was one specific variety of impatiens. And so we were trying to steer people to a better variety. So if you know that you've had problems with something, or there's been problem with fellow gardeners that you might steer clear of those and try to find something that you're going to be successful with. Remember that you need to be putting these plants in the right plant for the right place. Just remember that every plant has its preferences. So plant sun plants in sun, shade plants in shade. If they like to be dry, make sure you put them in an area where it's not going to be as wet. Or if it's something that wants to be wet, put it in that area. And just remember, anything that you buy, whether it's on a clearance cart or whether it's been discounted, anything that is stressed, if you take that home and it's stressed, it will lead to more problems later, because we find that stressed plants will end up getting more insect problems, and they get more disease problems, and they don't thrive. If you're someone that has good luck with picking up plants that don't look so great, well, I can't say don't do it, but I can always say try to pick the better looking plants, the healthier looking plants. That way you start out on a good note. That way you keep moving in the right direction, and the more likely to have success with plants. Make sure that the plants are stocky, short, and bushy. I know tomatoes tend to get tall pretty quick, but the key with tomatoes is you can bury them deeper. Other plants, you can't do that. And so that's why I put two examples on here. Herbs, you plant them at the same depth that they are. Most bedding plants, plant them at the same depth that you would find them in the pot. But tomatoes, on the other hand, you can buy them a little bit longer and lankier because you can bury them deeper. So just pay attention, get things that are short and stocky, bushy. Think about that root system. A lot of these plants at some of the box stores, as well as some of the nurseries, watering plants can make or break a garden center or even a nursery area. And so if they don't have a good water, plants start to suffer. And so they start getting root rot, and the roots are starting to turn brown to black. I always try to take a look at those roots before I buy them. If they're white or creamy white, they're healthy. If they're black or brown, or you just don't see many of them and they are not in good shape, you might consider putting it back. That root system can really tell you a lot about that health of that plant. And that can make all the difference of whether that plant does well for you or not. And blooms or no blooms. I prefer plants with no blooms, and only because there's not that added stress for those transplants. And what you may do is find one that is blooming nicely, and then when you get it home, you cut it back. You don't want to cut it back too hard to stress it out, but you want to get rid of the blooms that are there. That way you give the plant a chance to establish its root system. So when a plant is blooming, its focus is on those blooms. If you take away those blooms, then it's going to focus more on root establishment. If you can focus more on root establishment, you have the healthier, better plant. And so I always try to say no blooms, or remove those blooms once you get them home. And I know that is a hard thing to do. I know I always ask myself, they're so beautiful. Do I really want to do this? But I say, yes, you do. And then, of course, don't forget to harden off your plants when you get them from a greenhouse or a nursery, because a lot of times they're in a greenhouse protected environment, or they're in a shade house, or, they're in somewhere where they are all cozy and nice. And when we take them home and we put them out in full sun, or we put them out with the weather extremes where the wind is a little more brutal, sometimes those plants don't do so well. So I try to always, if I'm buying plants from the greenhouse or nursery, I always try to make sure that they get about a week and a half worth of acclimatization. So that I'm going to take them from that greenhouse setting to outdoors. So where they're going to have the full sun, where they're going to have the drying of the winds. So basically all you're doing is making it a little hardier. And so you can do this just by putting it in a protected spot for a few days and then gradually moving it out to where it's going to have the elements.